It is time for Around the 412 with Smitty and Tyler.
Welcome back to another episode of Around the 412. I am Tyler. With me, as always, is my co-host Smitty. Go follow us on all of our social medias at Around the 412. If you're not watching there already, go subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a like on the video. Hit the notification bell so you never miss one of our videos. And while you're there or listening on a listening platform, go check out the description. We've got all the links to our great sponsors. You can check it out there. This week, Steelers episode. It's kind of like an AMA is what I'm going into it as. Honestly, I'm not even sure. Smitty has all the questions that were asked, not a ton of the Steelers news front. So I feel like this is going to be more of like an AMA episode. We'll get into an actual like topic discussion next week. We got that planned out. But it sounds like we just got questions this week that we're going to be answering from all of you great people, listeners, watchers, whatever you are towards us.
Teaser for next week. We're going to be going through all the Steelers free agents and saying whether or not we think they're going to be back for 2025 or gone through free agency. So that'll be an entire episode next week. Tyler threw out, we can do that this week. I was like, yeah, if we do that, I feel like we got to scrap the questions that have come in so far, because I think we're going to spend an entire episode doing that. So that'll be next week. This week we did put out for questions. Did we not get a single one back then from Instagram? I saw that you posted a story on Instagram.
I did post a story, and I don't think we did. I mean, I know we're not really that big on Instagram.
Yeah, we're not popping on IG.
It's almost like a personal Instagram for us in reality.
Yeah.
No, I don't think we got any replies on that.
Well, it is what it is. You said there's not much news. Dude, like, I just feel like ever since the season ended, it's just been one long, like, Festivus, just airing of grievances from Steelers fans every single day through social media. And I get it, you know, as a fan base where we're sick of being stuck. I think that's probably the best word to use to say it. I think I put that in the title of last week's Steelers episode, that they were stuck, kind of where they are. And a lot of the questions I feel like are reflective of that, you know, not necessarily even the ability to look forward yet. There are some questions that are about, you know, Justin Fields or the path forward to help out this offense. But a lot of it is like, you know, still Tomlin related. You know, they haven't fired a single coach. Like, we were expecting some type of coaching turnover that hasn't taken place yet. Apparently, like Carl Dunbar, defensive line coach, we know his contract is apparently up. I mean, if you're looking for coaching turnover, that is not the place that I would be starting.
I don't know how that's the one you look at. How's that the one you decide, like, yeah, I feel like the defensive tackle spot needs revamped. We need to get somebody new leadership on that spot. Makes no sense.
Yeah. Hopefully that they sign him to a new contract, and maybe he's looking for something, like maybe he's looking for a heightened role or something, like maybe not just a pay bump, but also maybe looking to maybe change up his title a bit. And I would be like, Carl Dunbar has been awesome. Like, I think you look at obviously what he's done with Cam Hayward, the development of Keanu Benton, turning Monty Adams into a like actually legit rotational defensive tackle. But he, like, people think about defensive line, and I feel like they're not including the edge rushers in that conversation. He works with those guys because the Steelers edge rushers play as defensive linemen basically. So works with TJ Watt, works with Alex Highsmith, works with Nick Herbig, worked with Bud Dupree when he was here. Like, he's been integral in those guys' development and turning them into the players that they are. So Carl Dunbar is not the spot that I would be looking to if I were trying to turn over a coach. But anyway, so that's going on. And then today, someone with the last name Rooney was on a podcast and, you know, was kind of talking about just the state of the franchise, why they've had the postseason failures that they've had as of late. And, you know, was maybe to me a bit surprisingly honest with his own thoughts as to why it was. Like, I didn't expect him to like literally lay out each one of the playoff losses and say why he felt like they lost that game, but that's pretty much what happened. Now, as a fan base, I think that we don't want to hear the excuses, right? Like, I think that's probably just like there's a lot of truth behind what he said, and it is factual. You know, the circumstances of not like, look at the defense that they had in that game against the Jaguars. They pulled Sean Spence off the couch and he played 80% of the snaps in that game. And, you know, the way things went down in that game against Cleveland in 2020, snap over Ben's head, very first play of the game, and they find them. I think they were down 21-0 at one point in that game or somewhere within that realm. Certainly was the case against the Jaguars in 17. There's just been things along the way. And I get it. So I get it. I understand that people don't want to hear the excuses. I thought there was a lot of truth to it. And actually, that's where it will start, because Ross's question was, what do you think of Jim Rooney's comments? I don't think anything of them. Like, this guy has such, like, I understand his last name is Rooney, but this isn't Art Rooney the second making these comments or anything like that. Like, this guy's role in what he does, just as a whole, not just for the Steelers, is making sure that the Rooney rule gets implemented by all the organizations in the NFL. That is like what this guy does. He is not overseeing anything that goes on with the Pittsburgh Steelers. I don't like. Now I'll say, if maybe there's some naiveness going on here that he does have a role that I don't know about, but this is, to me, as if, like, other than his last name being Rooney, it's just it's somebody's thoughts basically on what's going on with the organization.
It's basically like you and I giving our thoughts on the Steelers if our last names were Rooney.
And maybe I'm naive for thinking that way. Maybe that there is more weight to be had with his words, with him saying this, but it doesn't matter to me. Like, because it's not Art Rooney II. It's not Omar Khan. It's not Mike Tomlin saying this. And at the end of the day, and I'll always come back to this, like, actions speak louder than words. The fact that there hasn't been any change right now has me much more upset than whatever Jim Rooney's going on a podcast saying.
Yeah, his comments, I don't really think anything of them. I think it's interesting to hear them, but I don't really put a lot of stock into what he says and thinking that that's going to have any sort of outcome or has any sort of interpretation by what the Steelers organization is doing or is going to do. It doesn't, I don't see the connection besides the last name. And that's really it. And a lot of people are going to take that and run with it. But like you mentioned, like, this guy's not Art Rooney II. He's Jim Rooney. And I just don't think that, unless, like you mentioned, unless we're being naive and we're just ignorant and we do not know that there's a bigger role for him to play, it doesn't seem like he is one of the people that is hands-on with the Steelers organization and has his hands on the actual outcome of what is to come with the Steelers offseason. And as far as him giving his thoughts on, like, the actual playoff games themselves and going game by game and what he thought happened, like I said, I feel like that's really not a ton different between us going game by game and figuring out what happened. I mean, maybe he has a more in-depth look on it because he is closer to the organization, if you want to argue it that way. I just don't think it has a lot of credence to it. It's just like another guy with a microphone in front of a mouse recording a podcast. It's just like the two of us doing it.
Jim Rooney probably talks to Art as much as Jerry Dulac does. So, I mean, people don't want to take anything that Jerry says as gospel. So, yeah, I don't know. Like, and people are talking about the timeline for coaching changes too. And if they were going to make a somewhat major one, like if they were going to turn over a coordinator spot or something like that, that probably would have been done, because I think you want to be involved in that part of the search right now. But like, wide receivers coach last year, they turned that over on February 5th.
Yeah.
Like, they got rid of Frisman Jackson and brought in Zach Ghazzani shortly after. So, like, if we're waiting for, an offensive line coach switch or, a senior defensive assistant, which I think needs to happen, like, those can still take place after the season ends. So I'm still expecting something to happen, but I am more comfortable a week later now on this episode saying that I think Terrell Austin's going to be back next year, which, by the way, I don't think is the worst thing. Like, if they moved on, I would have been completely fine with that. I probably lean that way, but I can be talked into the idea of them retaining him as long as, again, you're adding a senior defensive assistant that comes with that front seven background, because I think TA does some good stuff on the back end of things, but he doesn't know how to dial up he doesn't know how to get creative up front. And I think that's where he's lacking. That's why this defense, despite their talent, has been not as great. Like, this should be easily top 3, top 5 unit in the NFL based off the personnel. And I think that we agree there. But because the reason that they're not is because there's not that presence of a front seven guy that knows what they're doing up front.
Yeah, I agree with that. And honestly, taking this back to what we were just talking about with Jim Rooney's comments, I would have been more intrigued by what he had to say if it had to do with the actual construction of the team as far as, like, coaching staff and the spending of, like, why the organization spends the way it does and why they have the smallest coaching staff. If he has opinions on that, I will give more credence to that than just him giving an opinion on why they lost a playoff game 7 years ago.
Someone asked Alan and I for a question on Afternoon Drive today. If we were, well, Alan's going to get the opportunity to ask Art Rooney II a question when he does his, yearly media stuff. But it was like they said, if you were able to ask Art Rooney II a question, what would it be? And that's one of the things that I brought up is just like, I'm curious about Alan brought up revenue because they don't generate much revenue for as popular as they are. Like, what is the path to being more like the Dallas Cowboys in that way? And I said, kind of to go along with that, I'm curious as to, I would like some more clarity in terms of the way that the coaching staff is handled from a, monetary perspective. I'm not asking him to lay out how much each guy is making or anything like that, but is there some handcuffs put on the amount of people that they can have on staff from a financial perspective? Like, that's what I'm curious about. Would he answer that question? Probably not. But like, that's one of the things that pops in my mind if I had the opportunity to, because I think that is where the Steelers have had a disadvantage. Is it largely does come from the revenue side, because even think about how much that could impact contracts. I know everybody can spend the same amount because of the salary cap, but the revenue largely dictates your ability, the way that you structure contracts. Because if the Steelers are making more revenue and they were willing to spend more out of the pocket, more upfront cash, that's how you change signing bonuses. That's how you give more guaranteed money up front. Like those, I don't think people really think about those types of things, but that's kind of where I'm at with that. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because we talk about that all the time. Like, they need to expand the size of this coaching staff. People talk about the quality of the coaches, but certainly the quantity of the coaches, in my opinion, is something that needs a good, long, hard look this offseason. I'm hopeful that they learn from their mistake of, like, they saw what Brian Flores was able to do in his role for 1 year, and then they didn't replace it last year. I'm hopeful they saw that 1 year difference, how impactful it was not having that guy.
Yeah, you brought up revenue. I'm curious to see, like, if they were to answer a question like that, does the root of that answer really come back to the story that I believe it was Dave Wannstedt said before on air, talking about how the NFL at the time, after they won their 4th Super Bowl, came to the Steelers and said, "We want to market you guys as America's team." And the Chiefs said, "No, we're not America's team. We're the Pittsburgh Steelers." I wonder if there's just a sense of, like, we are just a Pittsburgh team. We are not even though they are a global brand and a huge national fan base. Is there a sense from the Rooneys that, like, they're still a Pittsburgh team and that's all they ever want to be?
I don't know. I mean, that's, but you're negatively impacting yourself. Like, if that's,
I know. I'm not saying it makes sense, but I'm wondering if that plays any role into it initially, if it did 40 years ago, because I just can't imagine a reason why they should be lacking in revenue, when I would say that outside of the Dallas Cowboys, you should be making more revenue than every other team as far as fan bases go. You and the Cowboys are up there with 1 and 2. I don't know.
Who do you think are the most popular teams in the NFL? Like, if you had to, like, the top 5.
A top 5? I would say Dallas Cowboys, Pittsburgh Steelers, Green Bay Packers,
so far 3
San Francisco 49ers, and the 5th one's hard, because those 4 are like my strong, mainly, and I think part of it too is because, like, I've lived in Pittsburgh, Utah, and Oklahoma now, and, like, I've seen these fan bases everywhere. But my
mind immediately goes to Raiders, but then I think about what we just went through, like, in the early 2000s, and I wonder, like, you're gonna see a lot of Patriots fans, assuming that they're not down for a long time, because, like, I think a lot of people came up, obviously were born and were just even born, and then like, actually got to a point where they could realize what was going on in their football watching lives, where the Patriots were still a dynasty within that period of time. Like, so I think there's gonna be a lot of Patriots fans that are our age, a little bit younger, coming up, and then they're just going to raise their kids as Patriots fans, and it's just going to be like teaching about Tom Brady, Bill Belichick. Like, as long as they can get back to a window of contention in relatively short order and not be down for a long time, I kind of think that the Patriots are right there too. So like I had the same top 4, but I was debating internally about between the Raiders and Patriots.
Yeah, see Raiders are kind of like the same mold of the 49ers, where all their history I feel like comes from or all their success comes from the past, and so their fan base comes from the past. Like I know that
Well, I guess
maybe
the same argument as the Pats, the Chiefs right now with what they're doing are going to be kind of in that same conversation.
I feel like Chiefs. I mean, maybe so. Maybe I'm discrediting how much people
Bills
just hop
Mafia?
on bandwagons of teams. Maybe I'm just because I saw was it this week? I saw on Twitter. I think it was this week. I saw on Twitter that someone tweeted out like people should it should be normal to or normalize swapping fan bases, and everybody was just like, get rid of this guy. So like, but I maybe I'm just like not giving enough credit for how many people actually do that sort of thing. So like the Chiefs could have a really big fan base, right? I mean, I'm sure they do. I would argue like for me, I think like if you're just going by popularity, the Chiefs are popular because not only do you have the amount of people following the Chiefs because they like them, but you got the amount of people following the Chiefs because they hate them and they can't stand them right now. Similar to the way the Patriots were. The Patriots were the most popular team in the 2000s and 2010, not just because of the people that liked them, but because the most eyes were on that team because you wanted to see them lose. And I'm sure that goes into play with the fan bases we're talking about, like our own, the Steelers. People tune into Steeler games just to see them lose. People tune into Cowboys games for the same thing, 49ers, Packers. And that happens when you have a lot of success over a long period of time, but I feel like the difference between at least I would say, and I think the Patriots are closer to them than like the Chiefs or the Bills would be. I wouldn't really include the Bills yet because they haven't even won a Super Bowl, but the Chiefs have won 3 recently. And I think that they have been growing in popularity because of that, for good and bad. But as far as like the Patriots go, they're probably the closest thing to like spreading out. But the difference is like I just feel like the Steelers, Cowboys, Packers, and 49ers fan bases are just so big nationally. Like you might see some Chiefs fans outside of like the Kansas City. I mean, I see a ton in like Tulsa where I live, but I don't think that you're going to see nearly as many as you would of those other fan bases, and even including at least when Tom Brady was there, the Patriots. I feel like they were more national than like what the Chiefs are now.
So this is based off an accumulation of social media following. So I'm looking at this article here that was published actually just the end of 2024, so relatively recent. And the title is All 32 NFL Teams Ranked Based Off Social Media Popularity. So I'm not saying that this is the end be all here, but Dallas Cowboys 1, New England Patriots 2, Pittsburgh Steelers 3, Philadelphia Eagles 4, Kansas City Chiefs 5.
Well, the thing I will say too is you're going to gain more social media presence the more popular you are. And social media now has a bigger role than it ever did for a lot of teams. And the Chiefs have been winning the most. So them being in the top 5 right now makes sense to me.
Yeah.
And plus a lot of those fan bases that I spoke of, like the Packers and the 49ers, I feel like those fan bases have a lot older of a fan base. I mean, similar to like the Steelers do in some sense, but and those fan bases kind of grow generationally. Like I don't know necessarily how many new Steeler fans there are outside of like you just live in Pittsburgh and you become a new Steeler fan. But like if you just live in, I don't know, Tennessee, like are you just gonna pick the Steelers as your team? Like I don't know how many people are doing that nowadays, and a lot of that probably has to do with like the Steelers not winning a whole lot recently in the postseason. So I feel like maybe the actual Steelers fan base hasn't been growing a ton over the past decade because they haven't been winning.
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting topic for sure, and I don't know how we carried that far on with it. But Ross also had another question. How much do you think Justin Fields is going to cost? This is interesting to me just because, so like, I don't even know what a comparable contract to look at was. Like, Gardner Minshew last year got $12.5 million per year on a 2-year deal with the Las Vegas Raiders. If I'm Justin, I think that I should be doing better than that.
Yeah.
At the same time, like, kind of within that ballpark is what I was hoping for as a Steelers fan. Like, I don't want to necessarily just, excuse me, go all in and say $20+ million to Justin Fields right out the gate before we've seen him play a full season as their starter. Even if it is just for 1 year. I think the structure of it is more important. Like, if you're doing like a base salary somewhere within that range, 12 to 15, but you could have like a bunch of escalators that are based off performance where it could turn into like a Jordan Love contract, like the year where he did that his first year as a starter, and he ended up earning like, the average quarterback salary basically. So, like, I don't know. Listen, if Justin hits, obviously it would be great. The probability to me goes against that. But if he turns out to be the answer for this franchise, it's a game changer. What's going on, everybody? Smitty from Around the 412, and I just want to take a quick second to give a shout out to our folks at Game Changers. Their logo on the screen right now, right above my microphone. Over 2,000 different designs in their catalog. Luxury heavyweight material. I'm wearing one of their shirts right now. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Head over to gamechanger.la or pick6.la to pick up some shirts. And guess what? Use code AT412. Save yourself $10 on your order every single time. Again, gamechanger.la or pick6.la. Best vintage t-shirts in the game. Check them out. 21 minutes in. Sorry, Game Changers. We got involved in that conversation, talked about the most popular teams in the NFL, and you lose track of time. But anyway, my prediction, I'll say 15 to 18 million.
That's literally what I was gonna say. I would ideally like somewhere between the 12 to 15 million range. I think he'll get 15 to 18 million. And I think if a team really wants to take a gamble on him, maybe he would get like 20. But I just don't see that happening. I think 15 to 18 million is probably the ideal for both teams or both camps when it comes to player and team. Like, obviously, player wants more. Yeah. Team would want it to be less, but 15 to 18 is kind of like that middle ground where you could make that work and you could sell that. And especially like you mentioned, like if you structure the contract in a way where it's more beneficial to the team, but still capable for him to make that money, I think that that's something that could work out. And I'm curious to see, because Russ talked about how he started talking to the Steelers about coming back. I'm curious to see how that all plays out with who they're going to bring back at quarterback, because unless I'm mistaken and Kyle Allen is here next year, they don't currently have a quarterback on their roster next year.
Skylar Thompson.
Okay. I forgot Skylar Thompson got brought in. I don't really think he's going to be QB1 or 2 for that matter. So
yeah, I feel like the best he might do is I think he'll be lucky to be the Kyle Allen of this year, the QB3.
Yeah. I'm curious to see how they handle that whole situation. Like which one do they go with? Do they decide that off of contracts is like what we're talking about right now too? There
is not a quarterback that is making in between Geno Smith and Gardner Minshew money. Like if it goes from 25 million per Geno Smith to 12.5 per for Gardner Minshew. So nobody within there, right? And then right above Geno, Baker Mayfield, maybe one of the best deals in football right now at the quarterback spot, 33 million per.
He's been good
among quarterbacks.
He's been good. I gotta be honest with you. I know a lot of people don't like Baker Mayfield. I was always a Baker Mayfield fan in college, even when he was on the Browns. Like obviously he was a Brown, so I didn't want him to win, but I always wanted personally. It's kind of like Lamar Jackson for me. Like I want him to personally do well, even though he's on the Ravens, and I hate the Ravens. And so to see him in Tampa having success, obviously lost in the first round of the playoffs to Washington, that was a bummer. But seeing him have success, that's a feel good for me.
Yeah, Jordan Love's now making $55 million per year, but he signed a 1 year, 13.5 $13.5 million deal prior to that, but there was like a bunch of escalators and stuff in it that allowed him to make what was the additional money? I think he got close to like it could have been close to 30, something like that. But anyway, yeah, I'm not saying to do that with Justin Fields necessarily, but to turn back to conversation, you mentioned Russell Wilson being on the Pat McAfee show today and talking about that. Like a lot of people, I think, made too much of that. Like, of course, Russ is going to say that. And of course, the Steelers, they're going to have conversations regardless. Like the Steelers are going to talk to all 24, I think they have free agents. Like, even if there's not really a chance of bringing them back, they still like they got to do their due diligence. They wouldn't be operating as an organization if they didn't have those conversations. Because what if Russ was like, yeah, I'd take $5 million, and you did like they just passed on the opportunity to bring him back for $5 million? Like, does that opportunity exist? Probably not. But you gotta at least have a conversation with the guy and see where he's at. Does he even want to come back? Like, you got to find out if both parties even want to make it happen first and foremost. And then you start talking money, you start talking years. So I think people are making too much of the fact that he said that they were talking. I'm still with the mindset that it's Justin Fields that's back next year. I think that's the direction that they want to go. And I think even based off what Russ did last year, I think Justin's still going to end up being, or I'm sorry, the end of like last year, the stretch that he had, still think Justin Fields is going to be the cheaper option.
Yeah, and I was about to ask you, like, would you prefer Justin Fields at 18 versus Russ at like $20 million?
I mean, I'll be honest, like, give like the same amount. I probably lean Justin at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the element of not knowing, and I'll fully admit that, because I think it's the same as, and I know that it's not like Justin's some rookie that we haven't seen play at all, but there's still like somehow he still has that, like, I don't even know how to describe it.
Do you trust the Steelers to take off the training wheels if he's the full-time quarterback?
Well, I think they have to. Like, I don't know how you go if you don't have Russell Wilson's presence there and it's Justin Fields mid-round draft pick, Skylar Thompson. Like, yeah, you have to. I mean, you don't have an alternative to me to not do so. But the way that I'm trying to describe the other that I am there, it's like somehow still, even though he was drafted in 2021 and he's now on his second organization, there's just still something to him that you can't fully quit. Like, you can't say that your mind's fully made up on what Justin Fields is still. Like, at least for me, that's the way that I look at it. I'm not viewing him still as like a prospect or anything like that, but it just still feels like to me there's something that's on tap there. And I don't think he's ever going to be like an elite passer or anything like that. I just think that he does more things that can cover up the deficiencies of an offense that I think aren't necessarily worth buying into long term, but at least getting us to the next guy.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And I think that there is definitely some unknown when it comes to Justin Fields, and as far as like, and I think part of that too, and I was just thinking about this while you're talking, is that I feel like you could legitimately make I feel like excuse is a bad word because that's a word that people are not going to want to hear when it comes to results. Yeah. But like, I feel like you could come up with an excuse as to why Justin's career has panned out each year of his career so far. Like, I mean, yeah, 2021 getting drafted to the Bears, terrible situation to go into. Then year 2 gets a brand new head coach, and that's not working out. And then you have to deal with getting replaced by Caleb Williams, going to Pittsburgh, starting out, knowing that you're not the guy, but you get the starting job because of Russell Wilson's injury. You start the team to 4-2 and still get benched. And I don't get me wrong, there's definitely a lot of bad within that those seasons as well that has been shown, but there's still that element of the traits that he could have, being able to mask a poor offense, like you were saying, and in a offense that does not have the talent to be able to succeed at a high level. If you just strictly want a pocket passing quarterback like you had with Russell Wilson, I don't think that anyone would say that like for a game or two, the offense did accelerate, especially in the passing game. But overall, if we look at the stretch that Russell Wilson had as a starting quarterback, and you look back at what Justin Fields did, was the offense that different ultimately? Like, was it that different between the two of them?
No, I mean, because they were worse in the red zone. Like the numbers bear that out. And I understand the level of competition too, but like we can only go based off the data that we have. And the offense was worse in the red zone as a collective once Russell Wilson got in there from that time into the end of the year than they were in the first 6 games of the season with Justin. I think it's largely due to his legs. Like I'm saying, I don't think that you're going to all of a sudden in year 5 see some drastic improvement from Justin Fields as a passer. I just think that what he does with his legs and getting him, like, actually, let's just bring this question into it now because Kobe said realistic options to improve the offense, assuming it's Russell Fields again at QB. So receiver, running back, O-line, via draft or free agency, whatever you think. I think when you are adding in the element of continuing to invest in the offensive side of the ball, it's also easier to buy into the guy with the traits like Justin Fields has. Like we know, like, is Russell Wilson still capable of being a serviceable quarterback with the right elements surrounding him? We had this discussion last week where I said, I think that the Steelers just had too many parts that didn't fit together. Isolated, maybe a lot of them could have worked in different situations. I think Russell Wilson falls into that, where like he's probably still somewhere able to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. I just don't think it's here because of Arthur Smith as the offensive coordinator, what he wants his quarterbacks to do, and the lack of weapons. Now, I'm hoping that lack of weapons improves next year, as well as getting better up front. And I think getting Troy Fautanu back in the fold just by proxy is going to do that. But the weapons part of that is big. I think that wide receivers obviously where you look to first. I expect them to invest heavily there. Like I know that we just came off an offseason where it was like shoot and miss. Like Omar Khan went 0 for 30 from the field trying to get a receiver. But you got to keep shooting. And I think they're going to this offseason. I think it's very possible that it's like a double dip situation, maybe even 3 receivers that they add, depending on if George Pickens is traded. I think they're going to invest in one heavily in free agency. I think they're going to land one of the top guys. I know that they want T. Higgins. I'm not saying that they're going to land him. I think they're going to be part of that market. Not even sure if he's going to leave Cincinnati. We'll see how that plays out. But if he does, if he hits free agency, the Steelers are certainly going to be one of the teams that are linked to him. My prediction, and this is based off some texts that I've gotten about how much they love this dude, I think they land Chris Godwin in free agency. And then I think they draft one pretty early too. I think that their first round pick could be Emeka Egbuka if he's there at 21. And all of a sudden you're looking at that wide receiver room thinking they've turned a weakness into what might be a strength. Depending on what happens, obviously, with a guy like George Pickens, can they convince him to stay for 1 year, even if they're not giving him an extension? I don't think so. I think that he would probably force his way out if that were the scenario. Do they even want him around, or do they trade him? And if they get that draft pick back, what does it look like? Is it like a round? I would hope round 3. I think that's probably best case scenario that you're getting a 3rd round pick. But that's the room to me that I look at immediately, and I'm like, this is going to look a lot different next year. Like, I don't think that they want to go down that path again.
Yeah, I think that's the one that's the glaring one. That's the one that has to change. You clearly saw this year that it was George Pickens and then a steep drop off all the way down to Calvin Austin. And then I would argue like there's probably another drop off to Van Jefferson and everybody else that was playing in the wide receiver room. I wouldn't even consider like Mike Wallace, like or not Mike Wallace. So Mike Williams. We didn't really get enough of him in the offense to really even say that he was ahead of Calvin Austin or even ahead of Van Jefferson that much in this offense, like for the last month of the season. So I think that offensively, wide receiver is the glaring issue, and I agree with you. I think they're at least going to get 2, if not 3, depending on how George plays out. And in my mind, I don't know if it's just a foregone conclusion in my mind just because of all of the events that happened this year. Like I just think he's gone, especially like the way that he ended the season. With the post game comments, like does that make you feel like optimistic moving forward? No, like I don't. I know that like I know that you can like spin that to say like that's not necessarily a bad answer, but at the same time, I feel like that's a bad answer. Like I feel like you could have said something a little bit better than just flat out no. Does that make you more?
If you want my honest opinion, I don't think that he heard optimistic. Like, as somebody that like not tries to bash George, but I think George has made his own bed here in Pittsburgh, largely. I don't think he's made it easy on himself. And I've tried past tense to give him the benefit of the doubt a lot. I haven't found myself doing that as of late. I'm not 100% certain. It wouldn't surprise me if he didn't even know what was said there. Like, I don't think he understood what was being asked, is what I'm getting at. I don't know if he heard a different word or what.
He just replied without listening, basically.
Basically, yeah, which I do a lot. Like, I can't fault him for that. I
do a podcast with
typically.
Yeah.
Typically, I wouldn't say no. I would say yeah.
As
opposed to he went the other route. But yeah, I mean, I agree about him not being here, though. I said that either last week or 2 weeks ago. That's one of my predictions for the offseason is a George Pickens trade.
Is that
I don't know how
the in-person reality of that one meme where it's just like a huge long text and he's like, I ain't reading all that. Happy for you or sorry that it happened. Like that,
exactly.
That's basically what George
did.
Yeah, no, I think that if you thought 3, if George did move on, if you got a guy like Chris Godwin or T. Higgins, like one of the bigger fish in free agency, and then you draft one early in the draft, I still think you could go out and get another like maybe a more veteran wide receiver as the third one.
Can I tell you what my concern is?
What?
My concern is Amari Cooper is the vet that they get. And not necessarily
he looked old, if I'm being honest. In Buffalo, when he dropped traded to Buffalo, he looked old.
And like he led the league in drops this year. And drop percentage because he was targeted like the fewest he's been in a long time this year between Cleveland and Buffalo, and he still led the league in drops. Like drops can be fluky too, but like I haven't seen the same player. Like he's known for his route running. I think that's going. Like I think that we're seeing that diminish in real time. So that's not necessarily somebody I'm interested in. I know a lot of people have thrown out Keenan Allen. Maybe if you want to swap that name, like regardless of which one it is, if you get one of those two plus a Chris Godwin and also draft somebody, then okay, I can buy into that. But if it's like you're getting Amari Cooper, drafting somebody and calling it a day on this room, I'm not seeing it. I'm not seeing it. I think you're better as a whole. Well, depending on what happens with George, but I'm not buying into what that room is going to be in like a year or two. Like I think you need a multi-year solution at that wide receiver spot. Which again, like they tried to do, if they land Brandon Ayuk, we're not having this conversation right now. Now, if everything went the exact same way, he's coming off a torn ACL, but I don't know if that would have, who knows how things would have changed if he would have ended up being traded to Pittsburgh. Another name that's been thrown out there, Nick just texted me the name Nick Westbrook-Akine. He only had 32 receptions this year for the Titans. He had 9 receiving touchdowns. He was on his Jericho Cotchery-ish over there in Tennessee. Plus, he played for Arthur Smith. That's another guy where it's like, okay, if you get him and Chris Godwin or something like that in free agency and draft a guy in the like day 1, day 2, I can get behind that and still be okay with a George Pickens trade.
He almost matched his career touchdown total prior to this season combined.
Yeah, he went from what?
He went from 10 to 19.
19, sorry. Yeah, I said he had 9. Yeah, 10 to 19.
That's wild. I mean, I wouldn't mind that. I just think that you have to, if you lose George, you got to get 3. I don't think there's any way that you even go in with 2 and say that your wide receiver room is fine, especially for the fact that you missed out on an entire year of Roman Wilson, and who knows what that draft pick is going to turn out to be. I would
say you trade George, you add 3, you still have those 2. And I'd like to bring back Ben Skoranek as like a wide receiver 6. Maybe he's not active every game. I don't know how that room's going to shake out, but like you're right. Maybe Roman Wilson, who knows what he's even going to look like. I think Skoranek, what he brings special teams, what he brings as a blocker, I think there's still some value there. I'm not sure if they're going to want to play 6 receivers week in, week out. But like that's the guy from this room that if I'm carrying somebody over along with, the 2 guys under contract, Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, I'm picking him.
Yeah, I would pick him too. I think Skoranek was really good. Very, very valuable. Does stuff for a lot of receivers aren't going to want to do, like you mentioned, special teams. So that's something that's good. But what I was going to say a little bit ago, I would love Emeka Egbuka. In the first round. I mean, there's several guys that early on I think the Steelers should consider taking. And for wide receiver, this is the first time in a long time that wide receiver is going to be in play for the Steelers in the first round. and it
Yeah.
being an actual serious thing. Because there's several people that always talked about, could the Steelers take a receiver in the first round, just because they always seem to draft well receivers wise. But a lot of the draft history with receivers are later rounds or mid rounds in the draft where they find solid receivers. I mean, their last first round receiver was, if I'm not mistaken, Santonio Holmes, in like 2006. Yeah. So I just don't think that.
To be honest, the drafting of receivers with the Steelers, I feel like has kind of lost its luster a little bit. Like, I'm not saying that it's gone the opposite direction. They don't know how, but like I feel like it kind of gets overstated how good they are at finding receivers, especially nowadays where it's like receivers just for the most part come into the league and they're good. Like they're so pro ready now coming out of college, and the Steelers are one of the teams that didn't hit on that in 2024. The guy that they took before that, probably not getting to a second contract. Like I know that's part of it too. Like from talent perspective, they're hitting on guys, but something's going wrong with their evaluation, even if it's the off the field as opposed to on the field. So
yeah, the one that stings
or they just don't
me,
care.
And I know you liked Roman Wilson coming out of college, and I did too. But the one that stinks for me is like my guy that I wanted the Steelers to draft was taken a few picks later, Jalen McMillian, by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, he had a really nice second half. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he wasn't doing much at the beginning of the year, but he had a really nice second half. Dan Orlovsky told me Ladd McConkey should be the guy, and he didn't get to their second round pick anyway. But you know, imagine if they would have had the production that Ladd gave the Chargers on this roster.
Right.
But who knows? I mean, it's dependent on the quarterback position, obviously, too. But Kobe's question was about all the positions. So I think offensive line is really interesting, too, because I don't know about you. I mean, are we just 100% handing the keys to Mason McCormick at one of those dark spots? Because I'll be honest, I'm on my own island here, other than Derek Bell, because we've had conversations about it. So I know he's on the island with me at the very least. I'm lower on Mason McCormick than I've seen the fan base be. Like, I think for a 4th round rookie, I think you got to tip your cap to the effort that he gave. And I think he has the right temperament, which is, 50% of it at least. But like way too high pad level. We know low man wins. I think that there were way too many rough moments in pass pro. I think people really like overreacted when he got hurt to the fact that they weren't going to have him. Like, I'm like, I don't think there's that much of a drop off from him to Spencer Anderson. Yeah, I didn't see somebody that should be guaranteed a job. Like I again, good for a 4th round rookie that we weren't expecting to play this year. And if he's going to come in and compete for a job, great. It's just odd to me that so many people just assume that we have an answer there in him.
Yeah, I would think that they look at a guard. I don't think that Mason McCormick should go into 2025 being your starting right guard necessarily. I think that he did a fine job for most of the season and filling in that spot with James Daniels going down, but ultimately he wasn't even supposed to play this season, at least not in the role that he did.
And he was really bad from that Cleveland the snow game on the rest of the year, basically.
Yeah, and that's why, like, you got to add context to it, like you just mentioned. Like, he's a 4th round pick, so from what you got for your 4th round pick as a rookie, you take that and you cap your tip your cap to it. But I just don't think that you can just like wash your hands of that and say it's all clean and completely move on from that position. I think you got to look to add to that position. I mean, the one rookie that on the offensive line that you got a lot out of, Zach Frazier, a lot of promise there, and he looked really good for the majority of the season. But like you can't say that about the others that they drafted last year. Troy Fautanu missed the entire season. Not his fault, obviously, but you don't know what you're getting from Troy Fautanu yet. And then Mason McCormick, solid effort in year 1, but I just don't think that I'm there in saying that you should just hand him the keys in year 2 and you have your starting right guard. I don't view that partnership, and maybe I'm thinking about one example in specifically, and maybe a lot of people don't view it this way, but I did see someone online like several months ago saying that maybe they found their new Pouncey and DeCastro with McCormick and Frazier, and I was like, we need to pump the brakes a little bit. I mean, we're talking about like all timers on the offensive line with those two, and these guys are just rookies. I mean, don't get me wrong, Zach Frazier, awesome, all rookie team like you just mentioned, and Mason McCormick did a solid job, but I think people need to relax a little bit, not be so knee jerky.
Absolutely. Running back, we got a question about the thoughts of Ashton Genty becoming a Steeler. Now that would obviously require them investing their first round pick, assuming
How about no?
And I love Ashton Genty as a player. I don't think that the value lines up there. If I felt like the Steelers were if they were in the Eagles spot before they added Saquon, and we just needed a running back to drop in, and you felt like spending a first round pick on that guy, sure, go ahead and do it. I don't think that the Steelers are there with their roster. I think they have too many other needs to invest in another first round running back. And there's honestly some other guys that I think about fit the system that Arthur Smith wants to run a lot better. I think you look at a guy like Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, and he would be a perfect fit for what they want to do. I think Quinshawn Judkins, not to make this an Ohio State podcast, but he would be a perfect fit for what they want to do from a scheme standpoint. A back that nobody's talking about really that might, certainly will go at some point on day 3, and I think early day 3 at the very least, if he doesn't go at the back end of day 2. Bishal Tootin out of Virginia Tech. He just from like an outside zone scheme perspective, he might be the best fit for that. And I know my boy Nick Martin is also high on Tootin. So not somebody that I've been super overexposed to, but I've seen a little bit of, obviously playing in the conference that he plays in. But a guy like, could they find some value in like an Ollie Gordon that didn't have a very good year and slipped down? It's probably just slipped down the board a little bit. Like I've seen some rankings where he's like the 15th to 17th running back in the class now. And if the draft views him that way, that'll certainly be interesting to me. There's like 25, 30 backs that are getting drafted this year or should get drafted this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ollie Gordon would be an interesting one to me. If you could get him in like early day 3, I think that would be something that
is that enough of an investment for you to go along with Jaylen Warren though?
For me, yes.
Okay.
I'm going into 2025 knowing that Jaylen Warren is going to be your primary back at least to start the season, and that's going to be the first time you really see Jaylen Warren as the primary back for an extended period of time. And then after that, like if you add a guy like Ollie Gordon, who, they're not exactly the same, but if you want to talk about like just player type, Ollie Gordon is closer to Najee Harris than he is to Jaylen Warren. And so I think that you could have more of the complement if he does find himself getting some playing time and getting the field. But like what you mentioned earlier, so like someone like Quinshawn Judkins, I think that he would be a really good pick for the Steelers at a really, really good value and kind of be another complement to what Jaylen Warren can bring and kind of find that tandem again, that what you had with Najee Harris. And I know you just mentioned that you don't want to make this an Ohio State podcast, but if their first 2 rounds, and I can be fine either way, but if their first 2 rounds went either Emeka Egbuka and Quinshawn Judkins or Tyleik Williams and Quinshawn Judkins, I could talk. You could talk anybody.
Travion Henderson.
I would be fine with any of those guys. Ohio's look at the national championship. Ohio State is tons of talent, but literally some of the guys that I'm looking at are all from Ohio State. Like in the first round, the 2 main guys as far as reality of who could be at the position and what I think the Steelers need, like Tyleik Williams is one of the guys that I definitely think could be in play for the Steelers in the first round at defensive tackle. And Emeka Egbuka, obviously, he's one of a slew of receivers that I think that the Steelers should be looking at in the first round, but there's a reality that he could be there. And I think that it would be smart.
They need to start getting involved. They need to start getting involved with the receiver rooms of LSU and Ohio State. How much more evidence do we need about the way that those 2 colleges produce wide receivers? Like they need to get involved in it. This should be the year if Emeka Egbuka's on the board. To me, that's the pick as we sit here right now. Now, free agency takes place before the draft, so that could change for me. But right now, if the draft was tomorrow, I would be pounding the table for them to take Emeka Egbuka if he was there.
So I think the only thing that would change for me is if they took a guy like T. Higgins and you spent all that money on a wide receiver. Maybe you wait a couple rounds to take another one. But even if you took a guy like Chris Godwin in free agency, I would still be looking at receivers as a realistic option in the first round.
Maybe if they were to get Chris Godwin and Pickens is traded, maybe you look at like a Trey Harris out of Ole Miss, who like body type is more like Pickens. So then you still have that type of profile. Godwin probably would play. They probably still need him to play outside because of Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson. So, but Chris Godwin's been a slot demon in the past, so he can kind of line up wherever. And I'm curious to see how he bounces back because he's coming off a knee injury.
Well, if Godwin plays outside, then you could take Ibuka and he could play in the slot.
Yeah, but what do you do with Calvin and Roman? Like that's why
figure it out. You just play 2 wide receiver sets.
I mean, when do we ever see them play two in the slot, like each slot? Like we don't see them go 4 receivers a ton, especially because of Pat where he lines up. So I don't know. I don't know what they're gonna do, but yeah, they certainly need an influx of talent on the offensive side. Appreciate the question, Kobe. And I worked in the Ashton Genty thing in there for my guy, Mr. Norris, who said Ashton Genty a Steeler question mark. I don't think that it lines up for where they're at right now. Love the player though. I think he's easily the best back. I don't think that that's the route they can go. And to be honest, I don't think he's going to be there. Like that's the thing. You're probably talking about trading up to get him. It's the Najee Harris conversation, but a better player.
Yeah.
Like we were like, if you're taking Najee at this spot, we still don't love it, but please, for the love of God, don't trade up to do it. And that's what we were worried about that entire draft night until he fell. All right. Last one here from Eddie P. Boy, Eddie Provident said, would you as a fan trade places with a fan of the Commanders? Basically, you trade a bright future at the cost of the memories of 2 Super Bowls that happened in your lifetime.
Can I go first?
Yeah.
No. And I think that anybody that would trade that is insane. And let me say why. I understand that the Steelers last won their Super Bowls when I was about to turn 14 when that Super Bowl happened. Mm-hmm. So the year we were turning 14, we were 13 at the time when the Steelers won that last Super Bowl. I understand it's been a very, very long time, but I have those memories. I have the memory of Super Bowl 40. I don't care how much future you have. There's no guarantees in this. There's no guarantee you will ever win a Super Bowl, no matter how good the team is. So that is why I think anybody who says they would trade past championships for a better future is nuts to me. I mean, imagine asking that in the like mid to late 80s, early 90s. Imagine asking that to a Steeler fan. Would you trade or asking them, would you trade the 70s Super Bowls if you could be the 49ers or the Cowboys right now? Like I just no, I wouldn't. And I don't think it's close at all. I don't really hesitate with that question whatsoever because there's no guarantee that you'll ever win it, especially if you want to add more context to the question when you have guys like Patrick Mahomes in the league and the Kansas City Chiefs. Like I just think that there's so much talent around the NFL, and there was back in the day when the Steelers were winning, but there's so much talent around the NFL right now that I would take the ones that I already have without knowing the next time I'm going to get one, because if you trade those away for the hopes that you might get one, one may never come.
The best case scenario for Commanders fans is they create the memories that we have as Steelers fans. That's what this is all about. Like, obviously, you enjoy the moments in real time, but once the season ends, it's a memory immediately. Teams that didn't win the Super Bowl are looking forward to next season having a clean slate, and hopefully it's their team's time. The team that won the Super Bowl, they're reminiscing on the one that they won. I know for a while, it's as Steelers fans, all we've been able to do is reminisce, but in a best case scenario for the Commanders, they have these memories to look back on based off the window that they have right now. Now, their window is going to be open as long as Jaden Daniels continues to play at this level. Argument based off him being a rookie that he's only going to get better. So window wide open for them.
And he's already a dog.
Yes. Window wide open for them. And maybe they win more than 2. Maybe. That's the word that's included in there. That is why I don't think that this is a conversation. The easy thing to say because we're watching it happen in present time is, yeah, because you want to be a part of what's going on right now in the moment. That's being a prisoner of the moment. But again, when you look back on, 10 plus years from now, 12 years, 15 years, 20 years, the window that we got to see for the Steelers, that's what the Commanders are hoping that they can look back on and say they got a couple Super Bowls out of. But we'll see if that comes to fruition. But no, Wouldn't trade it to be a Commanders fan right now. Interesting. Like, I guess the Chiefs would be too easy to put in that spot. I think the Commanders was probably the right pick. A team that's clearly
Sure.
way overachieving where we thought they'd be. But I mean, look at it like this. Look at the Ravens, look at the Bills, look at the Eagles that don't have. I know the Eagles won in it. That's like a different window though, right? Like even though it wasn't that long ago, like this is a completely different team, different starting quarterback. Yeah. So like I would say that their Super Bowl appearance versus the Chiefs was in this window, but they haven't won yet within this window. There's just like you said, man, there's no guarantees. You can have an awesome roster, but every step of the way, every generation that we've gone through, there's always been like that dude at quarterback that's been like the Thanos and just prevented it from happening. Like right now it's Patrick Mahomes. Before it was Tom Brady. Like the Steelers got 2 Super Bowls in my lifetime navigating windows of Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, like, and then obviously Patrick Mahomes now, they didn't win a Super Bowl in that window, but like you look at the quarterbacks that the Steelers somehow were able to get 2 Super Bowls during those eras when not a lot of other teams had any success. And they were in the same conference as those 2. Mm-hmm. So I'm thankful for the 2 Super Bowls we got out of it. As Jaden Daniels fan, I hope the Commanders get at least one because I want it this year, but we'll see.
I mean, there was like a 20-year stretch where almost 20-year stretch before Patrick Mahomes, where the AFC Championship, there was only like 2 years in that stretch where someone named Roethlisberger, Manning, or Brady were not in the Super Bowl after it.
Flacco, like was it Flacco?
Flacco in 2012.
Yeah,
and then I'm trying to think. Must have been somebody, obviously. Steelers, Colts, Broncos, Patriots. We're
gonna find this out because I'm gonna find that old graphic.
Yeah, it makes me mad that I can't think of it. Who from the AFC made the Super Bowl that wasn't Tom Brady, Ben Roethlisberger, or Peyton Manning? And Joe Flacco, for that matter.
Yeah, Joe Flacco was in there, like you said, in 2012. I don't know who the other one would have been. Are we sure it's 2 and not just the 1?
Maybe it is just the 1. I don't know. That's pretty wild if it is just the 1. Love how we're just looking this up.
That was still Peyton.
Peyton, Ben. I'm looking at it too now.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, it's probably just the 1.
Yeah, between 2000, so the 2001 season to 2019 season.
Well, Rich Gannon in 2003 for the Raiders.
Oh, yeah. Well, there you go. It's Rich Gannon.
But I don't think the graphic was that expanded. Like I think it was like some, but anyways, yeah, you guys get the point. Man, that was gonna bother me if we didn't at least figure out what that was. Anyways, Eddie, I'm curious what Eddie's position on that is because I can't imagine trading the memories just for hope right now. That's all it is as of right now is hope that they accomplish something within this window. So the future's bright, but the future was bright when the Bills hit on Josh Allen, when the Ravens hit on Lamar Jackson. And, maybe this is the year for Josh Allen to get over the hump, but we know it's not for Lamar Jackson. Potentially 3-time MVP. Nothing to show for it. So you never know. But anything else?
That'd be a better question for Lamar. If he wins MVP this year, would you trade your 3 MVPs for 1 Super Bowl?
I mean,
I know
Yeah.
the answer, but I feel like that's a more interesting answer.
Make him say it. Yeah. Make him say it out loud. All right. Anyways, before we get out of here, we got to tell you. Oh, we didn't even play the Keeks. Jeez. What am I doing? Anybody? How do I want to say that? Oh, you know where Eddie doesn't have to go? Keeks. Smitty from around the 412 here. And while I may not have much hair, the hair that I do have will not be cut by anybody besides Keek at Keek's Barbershop. My friend Christian Circle, been with us since day one. Keek's Barbershop, located 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Download the app, The Cut. Book an appointment with Christian today, or you can do walk-in with Tony or Ashley. But again, Keek's Barbershop, 401 Burkitch Way, Suite 2 in Beaver, PA. Go check them out. Old school vibe in there. Absolutely love it. Cannot recommend them enough. Wouldn't go anywhere else. Maybe I'll see you there. And then, of course, above Tyler right now, Marcello Electric, the logo, our friend Brandon Marcello and his brother Joe Marcello, their new company that they started on their own, branching out. Big shout out to them, servicing Beaver, Butler, Lawrence, and Allegheny counties. I'm so worried about leaving Beaver out now. Like I have to think about it to say that just because of one hiccup that I had. I can't believe that was the county that I left out. But anyways, whether it's commercial or residential, they can help you out. The link to his Facebook is down below. And then from there, you'll get his email, phone number off the page. You can reach out to him. Also, everything custom designs down there, whether it's a hoodie, long sleeve, t-shirt, whatever you want, whether it's our merch, your own merch, get something customized by our friend Haley Wagner. Everything custom designs, that's our small business. We got some shorts down there as well. We were in negatives this morning here in good old Monaca, Pennsylvania, so certainly didn't need the shorts today. But DC4L Customs, our shorts, you can get them spring, summer. At some point, it's going to get warm again months down the road here in Western PA, and look forward to being able to wear shorts again. And then, of course, GameChanger.la, Pick6.la. Save yourself $10 using code AT412 at checkout. Constantly rolling out new designs, over 4,000 now in their very expansive catalog. Follow us everywhere at Around the 412, all of our social media platforms. Again, like, subscribe, hit that notification bell if you are here on YouTube, and then leave us a 5-star review and subscribe if you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from. Search Around the 412, you'll find us over there. Anyways, for Smitty, for Tyler, this has been the Around the 412 Steelers show. We'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.